The wind tasted of dust and old regret. Cole Danner sat tall in his saddle as his horse. A tired gray named Boone trudged down the narrow trail winding through the dying grasslands. Above, the sky darkened, thick with storm clouds that had been chasing him since dawn. They didn't rush, those clouds. They were patient, like Cole himself, waiting for the right moment to break open. He was a lean figure, cloaked in a weathered duster, a slouch hat pulled low to shadow a sun-creased face. One blue eye was flecked with gray, and the other carried the memory of a bullet-clouded, glassy, but still sharp. His beard was 2 weeks overdue for a shave, and his boots held the wear of long miles. All he wanted was one dry place to sleep. Cole had left behind the dead town of Shelby's Crossing 2 days ago, heading west toward the charred remains of a ranch he'd bought with war pay and whiskey guilt. It wasn't much half-burnt fencing, a house missing a roof, and land so dry even jackrabbits gave up on it. But it was his. Or it would be if he could make it that far without collapsing. From exhaustion, his canteen was near dry, his horse needed oats, and his back ached from the saddle. As he came over a low ridge, the sound of a creek drew him down the slope, where cottonwoods arched like old mothers over the water, and then he saw it. Nestled beyond the trees, worn but standing, sat a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and sagging shutters, flanked by a barn leaning west like it had had one too many drinks. The fields were mostly wild now, save for a struggling vegetable garden and a few stubborn goats chewing on fence posts. Cole narrowed his eyes. Someone lived here. He rode up slowly, not wanting to spook anyone. Boone's hooves clopped against the hard-packed earth, drawing no small amount of attention. A dog barked. A curtain twitched, and then the screen door slammed open. A woman in a faded blue dress stormed out, rifle in hand. Her eyes were sharp and brown, her hair pinned up in a loose bun, and her posture said she knew how to use that Winchester. "You lost, stranger?" she called. Cole tipped his hat. "Not exactly." The rifle didn't lower. "Then what exactly brings you up our road at dusk?" "Just looking for a dry place to sleep. Storm's about to break." He motioned to the sky behind him. Another voice called from the porch. "June, he don't look like no trouble." A second woman stepped outside, this one with golden curls and a mischievous smile. She was barefoot and holding a tomato, like she'd just come from the garden. "I can decide that myself, Collie," the first woman June replied without taking her eyes off Cole. Cole remained calm. He was used to being watched like a snake. "In tall grass. I'll sleep in the barn. Just one night. I got my own blanket." June eyed him hard. "You armed?" Cole lifted his coat. A Colt rested on his hip, but his hand stayed far from it. "Storm's rollin' in fast." The second. "Sister Collie said," now studying him with playful interest. "And Mama always said it's bad luck to send a man out into the rain, even a rough-looking one." Before June could argue, a third figure slipped onto the porch quiet, almost unnoticed. This girl was younger, maybe 20, with soft eyes and dark braids. She carried a kettle in both hands and said nothing, just looked at Cole like she'd seen a ghost ride in from the past. June sighed. "Fine, you can bed down in the barn." "But we'll be watching." Cole nodded. "Appreciate it." The barn smelled of hay, leather, and old stories. Cole unsaddled Boone and rubbed him down before spreading his blanket in the loft, where the hay was driest. Thunder cracked overhead, and rain began to patter against the tin roof. Safe from the storm, Cole leaned back on his bedroll, staring at the rafters. He didn't plan on staying longer than a night. Didn't plan on anything, really. Not anymore. Back at the house, the sisters sat around the fire. "I don't like it," June said. "Men like him don't ride into places like this unless they're running from something." Collie twirled a strand of her hair. "Maybe he's running toward something." Rose, the youngest, sipped tea and stared out the window. He looked tired. They all looked tired, June snapped. That don't mean they're safe. But he didn't look dangerous, Rose said softly. He looked lonely. Collie smiled. Ain't we all? That night the storm raged. Cole lay listening to the rain beat the roof, the wind whistling through the cracks. He thought of his wife's voice, long gone. He thought of battles fought, of graves dug, of letters never sent. He closed his eyes and tried to remember what peace felt like. At the house, the sisters each lay in their own rooms, but none slept. June kept the rifle near her bed. Collie stared at the ceiling, smiling to herself, and Rose stood at the window, watching the barn. The lantern had gone out, but she swore she saw the flicker of a soul trying to rest. The rain passed by dawn, leaving the world washed and quiet. Cole woke early, saddled Boone, and quietly led him from the barn. He didn't want thanks or breakfast, just the road, but as he reached the edge of the property, the creek ahead shimmered flooded, the bridge washed out. He couldn't cross. And so, with a sigh and a silent curse at fate, he turned back. The sisters watched from the porch. 3 silhouettes in morning light. Collie smirked. Looks like he's staying. June folded her arms. Just until the creek lowers. Rose smiled softly. Just one more night. The sky over the Whitley homestead was painted soft pink as the sun crawled lazily above the hills, lighting up the earth that had drunk deep from last night's storm. Cole Danner stood just outside the barn, holding Boone's reins, his jaw tight. The creek, once a narrow silver thread, had spilled over its banks, flooding the road and turning the valley into a shallow basin of mud and rushing water. He'd scouted both east and west for an hour, boots soaked, teeth clenched. There was no crossing. Not today. Boone snorted beside him, sensing his master's tension. With no choice, Cole turned back toward the house. The front porch creaked under the weight of 3 pairs of watching eyes. Collie, barefoot and leaning against the post, grinned wide. June stood stiff with crossed arms and narrowed eyes, the rifle once again resting within arm's reach. Rose sat on the porch swing, her hands folded politely in her lap, a small smile tugging at her lips as she rocked gently. Well, Collie said, drawing out the word like syrup. Looks like we ain't rid of you just yet, stranger. Cole stopped at the steps, rainwater dripping from his hat. Bridge is gone. Creek'll hold me here another day. June arched an eyebrow. So long as it ain't 2. I'll work. For my keep, Cole replied plainly. Not one to freeload. Collie laughed. Ain't nobody said you were, cowboy. June muttered something under her breath and walked inside. That morning, Cole helped patch the chicken coop broken slats. Chewed wire, fox damage from weeks before. He didn't say much, just worked. His movements were quiet but confident, measured like a man used to fixing things that weren't his. Collie kept finding reasons to linger nearby. When he reached for a hammer, she handed it to him. When he straightened a beam, she held it with a wink and a toss of her hair. You always this serious? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. I'm just quiet, Cole replied, not looking up. I like quiet, she teased. Sometimes noise hides the liars. At noon, Rose brought lunch to the shade of the barn biscuits, sliced apples, and goat cheese wrapped in a cloth. She waited until he'd set the hammer down. You worked all morning, she said gently. Thought you might want this. Cole nodded, thanked her with a quiet ma'am, and accepted the food. She sat across from him in the grass, smoothing her skirt. Why don't you talk much? She asked after a pause. Cole shrugged. Ain't got much worth saying. I don't believe that. He looked up from the biscuit, his eyes catching hers. Soft and brown, filled with a strange, honest kindness he hadn't seen in years. Most folks don't listen anyway, he finally said. I would, Rose replied, if you ever wanted to talk. They ate in silence after that, but the kind that doesn't ache. The kind that understands. June, meanwhile, watched from the kitchen window. She'd seen too many smooth-talking drifters, too many broken promises. A man like Cole Danner, quiet, polite, and helpful, was the most dangerous kind. She turned back to her mixing bowl, beating bread dough with more force than necessary. That evening, Cole joined them for dinner, not at the table, but outside. On the porch with a plate in his lap, the sisters laughed, bickered, and passed the cornbread, while Cole listened, offering the occasional short answer when asked a direct question. What's your story? Collie asked finally, her bare feet curled under her. You look like a man who's seen ghosts. Everyone's seen ghosts, he answered. Yeah, but yours ride with you. He didn't reply. The air grew still for a moment, the silence uncomfortable. Rose shifted, her voice soft. You lost someone? Cole gave the faintest nod. Wife, 2 years back. Fever. They said nothing for a moment. Then June stood. We don't cry around here, but Rose whispered, I'm sorry. Collie leaned forward, her voice gentle for once. So you were married? Was. He stood and handed the empty plate to June without meeting her eyes. Thanks for supper. That night, the storm came back, not in the skies, but in the past. Cole tossed on his hayloft bed, haunted by memories of a woman's laughter echoing through a dry cabin. A baby that never cried. A grave dug in the frozen earth. The wind outside was calm. But inside, Cole Danner was breaking all over again. At the house, the sisters sat by the fire in their nightgowns, the room dim with lamplight. He's grieving, Rose said. He's hiding, June countered. He's helping, Collie offered. You saw the co-op. He fixed more in one day than we've done in a month, June sighed. Men don't help unless they want something, Collie grinned. Well, maybe he wants something we don't mind giving. Rose's eyes widened. Collie, I'm just saying, Collie shrugged. You see how he looks in that duster? I see how he looks when you're talking, June said flatly, like he'd rather eat nails. Collie laughed, but her eyes flickered. She wasn't used to being resisted. In the early hours before dawn, the sisters lay in their separate rooms, and Cole sat up in the hay, listening. Then a sound, a sharp crack followed by a thud. Cole jumped to his feet and grabbed his pistol. By the fence, something moved. He crept from the barn barefoot, weapon low. The moon lit the yard in pale silver. A figure, a man on horseback, was galloping away toward the woods, leaving behind a shattered gate and a nailed board with a message painted in red. This land don't belong to no women. Sell or burn. Cole stared at the message, teeth grinding. The Whitley sisters had enemies. And now, so did he. As dawn bled across the horizon, Cole nailed the board to a tree and stood staring at it. June approached with her rifle slung over her shoulder. You saw him? Rider, lone, gone now. You recognize him? Cole shook his head. But I've seen his kind. June looked at the message. They've been pushing us for months. First it was cattle gone missing, then fences cut. Now this. Cole turned to her. You should have told me. We don't need saving. I didn't say you did. They stood in silence for a long moment. You plan on running tomorrow? She asked. Cole looked at the flooded road, then at the barn. Then at the house where Collie peeked through the curtain and Rose stood holding 2 mugs of coffee. Creek still high, he said. Guess I'm here one more day. June gave the faintest of smiles, just a flicker. One more day, she echoed. But as she turned, a thought clung to her like burrs in the wind. 3 sisters. One broken man, and no way in hell this would end the way any of them expected. The sun rose slow the next morning, spilling golden light across the soaked ground. The storm had passed, but the land still felt heavy with silence. The Whitley homestead sat quiet, too quiet. Cole Danner awoke in the loft of the barn, stiff from another night on straw. His hand rested instinctively near the grip of his Colt, but the only sounds were the rustling chickens and the occasional bleat of a stubborn goat outside. The air held the scent of mud and blooming sage. The road beyond the flooded creek remained swallowed by brown water and drifting limbs. He rubbed his temples, sat up, and sighed. One more day or so, he told himself by the time he walked to the porch. The sisters were already up. June, apron on, was hauling firewood with a scowl on her face. Collie, in a red dress far too fine for chores, was setting a pie to cool on the window. And Rose, sweet quiet Rose, was humming while sweeping the steps, her hair braided down her back like a dark ribbon. Cole tipped his hat. Morning, June. Didn't stop stacking. Hope you're not planning on sleeping all day, Cowboy. Didn't plan on sleeping at all, he replied. But I could help with chores. You'd better, June said, but there was less fire in her tone. Collie grinned, hands on her hips. Well now, if you're helping, might as well earn a real bed. Cole blinked. Beg your pardon? Rose looked up from the steps. The loft's cold. And the roof leaks. We got a guest room, Collie continued. Mama's old sewing room. Got a clean mattress and a door that shuts. I'm fine where I am, Cole said. June narrowed her eyes. That barn was built for pigs and hay. You're neither. Use the room or don't stay. Her words landed like iron, but Cole knew enough to hear the buried offer beneath the bark. All right, he said finally, but just till the creek drops. Collie winked. Of course, just till then. Inside, the guest room was plain but warm. A lace curtain hung over the window. The bed was small but soft. A Bible lay on the knitstand beneath a doily, and a faded quilt stretched across the mattress. Cole stood in the doorway for a long time before setting his gear down. He felt like an outlaw breaking into someone else's memory. The day passed in sweat and work. Cole helped June chop wood and reinforced the broken gate that had been smashed by the nighttime intruder. She barely spoke, but he noticed her eyes. Lingered longer each time he handed her a new log. I can fix the barn roof tomorrow, he offered. June scoffed. And what? Put yourself on the payroll? I'm not charging. That's the dangerous kind of help. Maybe, he muttered. But I'm still giving it. Meanwhile, Collie had other plans. She dragged Cole into mending the back fence, just the two of them. She didn't need help. She needed an audience. See, this part's tricky, she said. Bending over just a little too far, Cole stared at the fence post. You flirt with every man that passes by? He asked bluntly. Collie turned, pretending to be offended. Do. I look like I get many passing by? I doubt you go unnoticed. She laughed an honest sound finally. Truth is, she said, voice quieter, I flirt to keep from crying. He didn't respond. I almost married a man once, she said. He promised he'd take us away. Said he'd pay the taxes. Said we'd be safe. What happened? Collie stabbed the fence post with a nail. He lied. They worked in. Silence after that evening. Rose brought a jug of sweet tea and fresh bread to the porch. She found Cole there alone, wiping his hands with a rag, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow. I hope you're not tiring yourself, she said. He gave a small smile. Better than thinking too much. Sometimes thinking's good. Not when there's ghosts involved. She hesitated, then sat beside him. When my pa died, she said softly, I heard his voice for a whole month after. Every time. The wind came through the corn. Do you still hear it? She nodded. Only when I'm scared. He looked at her. Are you scared now? Rose didn't answer. Just took a sip of tea and looked toward the fading light. After supper, the sky turned orange, then deep blue, and the land grew quiet. June cleaned dishes with mechanical fury. Collie played a slow tune on the piano that hadn't been tuned in years, and Rose sat cross-legged on the floor, sewing the hem of a dress that hadn't fit her since last spring. Cole stood near the doorway, hat in hand. "Good night," he said. "You sure you don't want pie?" Collie asked, patting the seat beside her. "I'm sure." "Then maybe you'll take a story?" Rose offered. "I don't have stories." June looked over her shoulder. "That's a lie. Everyone does." Cole paused. "Some are better buried." June's eyes softened for just a moment. "Sleep well, then," she said. That night, inside the guest room, Cole sat on the edge of the bed. He stared at the Bible, the quilt, the walls. Everything reminded him of a life he didn't deserve anymore. He opened his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. A woman with a child on her lap, both smiling. The edges were stained, torn at the corners. He tucked it back inside. Then came a knock. He froze. The door opened just slightly. Collie, double quotes, "Just wanted to see if you needed another blanket," she said. "I'm fine." She stepped in anyway. "It's a cold room, Collie." She stepped close, too close. "I ain't blind, Cowboy," she said, voice low. "I see the way June watches you. I see the way Rose listens when you talk." Cole stood. "And what do you see?" She hesitated. "I see a man who's ready to start over, even if he don't know it yet." He said nothing. She smiled, sadness flickering in her eyes. "Sleep well, Cole Danner." And then she left, leaving the scent of wildflowers behind. Later that night, a second knock. This time, it was June. He opened the door before she could speak. "I saw someone by the west fence," she said. "Didn't look like a coyote." They walked the edge of the property together, rifles slung, boots crunching gravel. They found boot prints in the mud fresh. "They're not giving up," June muttered. "Neither am I," Cole said. June looked at him, suspicion slowly being replaced by something else. "You planning on staying longer than one night?" He looked up at the moon. "Maybe." And far off, beyond the creek and the broken bridge, a man in a black coat watched the homestead. From the trees, he lit a cigar, took one slow drag, and dropped it into the mud. Then turned and rode into the darkness. Morning came with fire in the sky. The sun broke over the valley like a golden blade, cutting through the mist that clung to the lowlands and casting long shadows across the Whitley homestead. The creek had dropped some, but not enough to ride out. The water still gurgled angrily, tugging at the bridge posts like fingers trying to undo knots. Cole Danner was already out before the rooster crowed, booted and armed, walking the fence line with sharp eyes and slow steps. The tracks from last night were still there, deep boot prints by the west gate, a splintered fence post, and a drag mark that looked too wide to be from any animal. Someone had been there, watching. Waiting. Inside the house, June was boiling coffee on the old iron stove. The smell filled the small kitchen, and the clink of enamel mugs woke both sisters in their upstairs rooms. "Cole's already out?" Rose asked as she descended the stairs in a pale blue morning dress. June nodded, saw him through the window. "He's checking the perimeter." "After what we saw last night, I don't blame him," Collie mumbled, still tying her robe. "Whoever keeps sneaking around this ain't random mischief." "It never was," June replied sharply. Rose paused. "Why didn't we go to the sheriff months ago?" Collie scoffed. "Because Sheriff Whitmore's too busy chasing poker debts and pretty widows to care about our fence lines." "He'll care now," June said. "I wrote a wire. It'll reach him today." Rose looked at her, surprised. "You didn't tell us." "You were too busy baking and sewing," June said. "Someone had to do something." That morning Cole came back to the porch carrying a muddy scrap of black cloth with a silver button still attached. Callie's eyes widened when she saw it. "That looks like Luther Gray's coat." Cole looked at her. "Who's Luther Gray?" "Used to ride." with a gang up near Deadhorn Ridge. Claimed he reformed, but she swallowed. He's the one my fiancé worked with. Before everything fell apart. June took the fabric and studied it. This land's worth more than we think. Cole raised a brow. What makes you say that? June hesitated. Then she spoke. Our father found a spring down by the south pasture, crystal clear, cold as snow melt. He sent samples to a man in Wichita, claimed the mineral content could sell for high prices. Medicine, they said. Purity gold. Cole frowned. You never told me that. We didn't tell anyone, June snapped. But Luther must have found out. He's been trying to scare us off for months. Cut fences. Burned our barn last winter. Stole our livestock. Why not sell the water? Cole asked. June's voice dropped. Because we can't prove it's on our property line anymore. The documents were lost after Pay died. Callie's voice was quiet. Or stolen. Later that day, Cole saddled Boone and rode into the nearby town of Larch Hollow, a dusty outpost with 2 streets, 1 saloon, and more gossip than horses. He entered Salter's Mercantile, the only store with a working telegraph, and wired the sheriff himself. Outside, he noticed a black horse tied to a hitching post, its silver bridle too fine for a local farmer. Inside the saloon, voices hushed when he stepped through the doors. He felt eyes on his back-watched men do the slow drink and stare, do the silent nods to one another. He recognized the scent of old grudges in the air. Behind the bar stood a thin man with yellow teeth and a mop of greasy hair. You ain't from around here, the bartender said. Didn't know that was a crime. What's your business? Cole didn't blink. Protecting 3 women who've got a claim someone wants buried. A heavy silence fell across the room. From a corner booth, a man stood tall, black coat, and a scar across his cheek like a whip mark. You oughta mind your business, stranger, the man said. Women don't need protectin'. They need sense. Cole turned to him. You Luther Gray? The man smiled. Might be. Then you ought to know I don't scare easy. Luther stepped forward, tipping his hat. Then maybe you just ain't smart enough to be scared. Back at the homestead, the sisters worked in the garden pretending normalcy, but tension clung to their shoulders. When Cole returned that evening, his knuckles bruised and his jaw tight, June met him with crossed arms. You picked a fight? No, he said, climbing down from Boone, but I didn't walk away from one either. Collie pressed a damp cloth to his temple, her touch slower than necessary. He's coming here, isn't he? She asked. He said I had until Friday to leave. June's voice was sharp. And if we don't, he burns it down. That night, Cole stood in the kitchen with June long after the others had gone to bed. The lantern flickered as they spoke in hushed voices. You should run, June said. This isn't your fight. Maybe not, Cole replied. But I'm in it now. June stirred the kettle absent-mindedly. You barely know us. I know trouble when I see it. And I know when good people are being bullied. She looked at him, her eyes tired but fierce. What did you lose, Cole? He hesitated, then answered, My wife. My son. I wasn't there when the fever came. I was fighting in Arizona. By the time I got home, they were in the ground. June's breath caught. I came west to forget, he said. Figured I'd build a ranch, maybe drink enough to blur the edges. Didn't count on 3 women pulling me into their war. She looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped forward and reached for his hand. You're not alone anymore, she said softly. But outside, in the dark hills beyond the pasture, torches moved like fireflies. The past was coming back. The next day, they prepared. Cole taught Rose how to shoot a pistol. She flinched at every shot, but her aim improved. Collie rigged traps with broken glass and TRIPWIRE. June inventoried ammunition and sealed every window with boards and nails. By nightfall, the house looked less like a farmhouse and more like a fortress. Cole stood on the porch, eyes sweeping the tree line. Rose brought him tea again, but this time her hands trembled. They're really coming, aren't they? Yes. And you'll fight for us? He looked at her gently. I'll fight beside you. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He walked the halls, checked the locks, and finally ended up in the parlor, where the piano sat silent and covered in dust. He brushed it off and played a slow, broken tune. A lullaby he barely remembered from when he held a child in his arms. Collie appeared in the doorway. I didn't know you played. I don't, not really. She crossed the room and sat beside him on the bench. You could leave, you know. I know. Then why don't you? Cole looked down at the ivory keys. Because, for the first time in 2 years, I'm not running. Outside in the black woods beyond the pasture, Luther Gray watched from horseback. Beside him, 6 men in dusters loaded their rifles. He pulled a cigar from his coat and lit it slow, smoke curling around his scarred face. He pointed toward the farmhouse. Burn it down at dawn, he said. Dawn came slower than usual. The air was heavy, not with rain, but with a tension so thick it made the birds hold their breath. The golden light rolled over the hills, brushing across the Whitley homestead where no one slept. The house had been fortified overnight. Windows were boarded, furniture was stacked behind the doors, and lanterns were trimmed and placed in every room. A pile of loaded rifles and extra bullets sat ready on the parlor table. The barn was locked, the animals corralled. The creek still swelled behind them, offering no retreat, and Cole Danner stood at the front gate, his coat open, Colt at his side, Winchester slung over his shoulder. He watched the horizon as if he could pull fate from it by sheer will. Inside the house, the sisters readied themselves. June, in her father's old trail coat, loaded a shotgun with smooth precision. Her face was unreadable, but her jaw was clenched tight. Collie tied her wild blonde curls into a bandana and laced up her boots. Her revolver sat on her hip, but it was her eyes that held the fire reckless, hot, and bold. And Rose, dressed in a modest tan skirt and jacket, moved silently through the house, gathering bandages, cloth, and the Bible. She looked fragile but carried strength, like a whisper just before a THUNDERCLAP. Cole came back to the porch just as June stepped out. Hi. Check the high ridge, she said. No movement yet. They'll come at sunup, he replied. Men like Gray don't like moonlight. They want the sun to watch. June nodded. We've only got 6 rifles and 4 people who can shoot. 5, Rose said quietly, appearing behind them. I've been practicing. Cole looked at her. You sure? She nodded. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, he said. None of you are. Collie came out last, rolling up her sleeves. Well, Cole Danner, guess you're finally one of us. He smiled, faint but genuine. Didn't plan on it, he said. But I'll die defending this place if I have to. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. June muttered. They worked in silence for the next hour, setting up cover points, moving furniture, laying out plans. June mapped escape routes. Collie moved to the attic with a rifle for high ground. Cover. Rose stayed near the back door, watching the garden she loved like she might never see it again. Cole paced the porch, pausing only when he saw hoof prints, fresh ones leading in from the east. They're near, he said. Then something strange happened. He walked into the kitchen and saw June alone, wiping her hands on a towel. She didn't hear him enter. June? She turned, startled. What is it? I need to know something. Ask. Why didn't you ever sell this place? Why stay when everyone else ran? She looked down. Because it was Pa's. Because This land is ours, and because if we left, they win. Cole stepped closer. Is that all? Her voice dropped. It's also the only thing holding us together. He nodded. I understand that. She looked up, eyes meeting his. Do you really? I lost mine, he said. Wife, son, home, gone, all of it. And for 2 years I didn't care about anything. He took a breath. But I care about this. She stared at him a moment too long, then whispered, so do I. Meanwhile, Collie sat in the attic window, watching the hills through a spyglass. She saw them, 7 riders, black coats, guns on their hips. She didn't yell. She didn't panic. She climbed down, calm and fast. They're coming, she said. Cole's eyes hardened. It's time. They took their places. Cole behind the overturned wagon by the gate, June on the front porch, shotgun at the ready, Collie in the attic, peering through a slat in the wall. Rose in the parlor, pistol tucked into her apron, and then hooves, dust. Rose, the sound of metal, of leather creaking, of boots hitting the dirt. Luther Gray rode in first, flanked by 6 men, faces mean, guns drawn. Cole stood. Gray stopped 10 feet from the gate. Mornin', Danner, he said with a grin. Morning. You think you're a hero? No, I think I'm in your way. Gray smirked. You ain't just in the way, friend. You're gonna die here. Cole drew his revolver slowly. I've died before. Once in the war, once at home. This here's just a different kind of death. Gray's eyes flickered. You got women hiding behind those walls, he said. They ain't soldiers. They're better than soldiers, Cole replied. They've got something to fight for. Gray spat in the dust. Last chance. Ride off. Let us take the land. No need for blood. Cole smiled. You're already standing on stolen blood. Might as well stay. Gray sighed. Then motioned. To his men. All right. Burn it down. Gunfire exploded. Collie fired the first shot clean through a rider's shoulder, knocking him clean off his horse. June blasted another from the porch. Cole ducked and returned fire, his colt barking like thunder. Bullets slammed into the wagon, into walls, into windows. The Whitley house roared with battle. Cole sprinted from cover to cover, shooting and reloading, sweat soaking his back. Rose dragged a wounded man who had gotten too close into the garden and knocked him out cold with a shovel. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steel. June took a graze to the shoulder, but didn't stop firing. Collie kept yelling out locations from above. Left side 2 comin'. Cole duck. Smoke filled the air. Horses screamed. Men shouted and cursed. And then it was down to 2. Gray and one last man. Cole stepped into the yard, rifle aimed. Gray stood across from him, bleeding from a graze near his ribs. You're a fool, Gray said. Maybe. You don't even know these women. Cole's voice was low. I know enough. I know they didn't back down. I know they've worked this land with bare hands and broken hearts. I know they've got more courage than any man you brought with you. He cocked the rifle. And I know you're done here. Gray laughed. Then raised his pistol. A single shot rang out. Gray's gun clattered to the ground. He fell to his knees. Behind him, Collie stood in the attic window, her rifle still smoking. When the dust cleared, the wounded were tied, the dead buried, and the sheriff, late as usual, finally arrived with a handful of deputies. He stared at the destruction. What the hell happened here? Cole nodded toward the house. Justice. That night, they sat around the kitchen table, bandaged, bruised, but alive. Cole lifted a glass. To the Whitley sisters. June smirked. To our mysterious drifter who wouldn't leave. Collie winked. To Rose, who hit a man with a shovel. Rose blushed. He had it coming. They all laughed, and for the first time in years, Cole Danner felt something deep in his chest. Peace. But one thing still lingered. That night, June came to him outside under the stars. "You're staying, aren't you?" she asked. Cole looked at her. "I wasn't planning to." "And now?" He took her hand. "Now I'm planning everything." The sun rose slow and golden on the Whitley homestead, lighting the battered earth with a soft, forgiving warmth. The field still carried the scars of the battle bullet holes in fence posts, burn marks on the porch rails, deep hoof prints clawed into the mud like ghosts left behind. But there was peace in the air now. Not silence, but peace. And for the first time in years, Cole Danner didn't wake up reaching for his gun. He woke up to the sound of a rooster, to the smell of bread baking in the stove, and the soft hum of a woman's voice somewhere down the hallway. And it wasn't a dream. Not this time. That morning, he helped June haul fresh lumber to patch up the barn. They worked side by side, neither of them talking much. But the silence was different now, comfortable, easy. "I ordered new hinges from Larch Hollow," June said, lifting a beam with surprising strength. "Should be here next week." "Good," Cole replied, securing the wood. "We'll get the barn door swinging smooth again." "We?" He looked at her. "I figure I'll be around." June glanced at him sideways, her lips twitching. "And just what job title are you aiming for around here, cowboy?" "Foreman, fence fixer, maybe partner." June paused. "Partner, huh?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that day, Collie found him in the garden helping Rose stake up the tomatoes that had survived the fight. His sleeves were rolled up, his shirt stained, his hands dirty. "Never thought I'd see you kneeling in dirt instead of blood," she teased. He smirked. "Dirt don't shoot back." She squatted beside him, careful not to wrinkle her new skirt, one she hadn't worn in years. "You ever think of planting roots?" "I've thought of running less," he said. "Guess that's a start." Collie leaned closer. "If you ever get bored with chores and quiet mornings, you come see me in the orchard. I've got wilder dreams." He met her gaze, the corner of his mouth lifting. "I know." And then she kissed his cheek. Quick, gentle, not possessive, just grateful for the kind of man she had known still existed. In the afternoon, Rose brought a blanket and a book out to the pasture, and Cole, taking a break from hammering roof nails, wandered her way. She handed him the book. "You ever read anything just to feel something?" He looked at the worn pages. "A novel about a sea captain and a woman with a broken heart." "No," he said. "But I'd try if you asked me." They sat side by side in the grass, reading in silence, and she leaned her head gently on his shoulder. He didn't move. The sheriff returned that evening. He rode up slow, chewing on a toothpick and tipping his hat. "Well now, don't that beat all? 3 women running a ranch better than half the men in this county." June didn't smile. "You're late." "I brought documents," the sheriff said, pulling a rolled packet from his saddlebag. "County line marker was disputed after your daddy died. Turns out the spring's legally yours. All of it." Cole raised his eyebrows. Collie let out a loud whoop, arms flying into the air. June just took the papers and nodded. "I'll have these notarized." The sheriff grinned. "Maybe this place will be worth something someday." June looked around. "It already is." That night, the sisters cooked a feast goat roast, biscuits, gravy, mashed potatoes, and a peach cobbler that filled the house with warmth sweeter than any perfume. Cole tried to protest. "You didn't have to do all this," June cut him off. "Yes, we did." "You saved our land," Collie said. "You saved us," Rose whispered. "I was just looking for a place to sleep." Cole muttered. June placed a hand on his chest. "You found a home instead." They ate under the stars, at a table they dragged outside, the lanterns swaying from tree branches and fireflies flitting through the dusk. It didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like something older, sacred. When the food was gone and the night cooled, Rose played a tune on her harmonica. Collie sang the verses. And June's stoic, stern, guarded June smiled without trying to hide it. Cole sat back in his chair, eyes half-lidded, hat pushed back, letting the music soak into his bones. Later, as the others drifted off to bed, June lingered on the porch, arms folded, looking out toward the road. Cole stepped beside her. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Just not used to the quiet yet." He nodded. "Storms always echo a while after they pass." She turned toward him. "You staying?" He met her gaze. "I was a man with nothing. Then I met 3 women who refused to give up. I learned how to work again, how to feel, how to protect what matters." He took her hand. "I ain't leaving." She stepped into him, resting her head against his chest, and for a long time they stood there, 2 survivors no longer alone. Weeks passed. The barn was repaired. The spring was mapped and registered. Cole fenced off a new pasture, and Collie reopened the orchard stand with jars of jam and firewood bundles. Rose started a lending library from the parlor, with books she'd collected over the years, and June became the county's first woman to file a legal mineral claim, riding into Larch Hollow with a clean dress and a sharper tongue than any man in the room. One evening, as Cole sat with his boots kicked up on the porch rail, June handed him a small tin box. Inside was a simple brass key. "To the ranch house," she said. "Official, I mean. I thought I already had a place here." "You did," she grinned. "Now you've got a room too." He stared at the key. "Are you asking me to stay?" "No," she said, kissing him. "I'm telling you." That night, he moved from the guest room into her room, quietly, without ceremony, like it was always meant to be. And so, the man who rode in just wanting a dry place to sleep found himself with a roof, a job, 3 stubborn miracles, and a piece of land that finally felt like belonging, because in the end, it wasn't the house, or the spring, or even the safety that changed Cole Danner. It was them. June, who fought like a man and loved like a woman who swore she never would again. Collie, whose fire was matched only by her fearlessness. And Rose, who brought back a softness he thought had died inside him. He hadn't come west looking for salvation. But salvation found him anyway. In the form of 3 sisters who refused to let him go.